We are live.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Clayton Thomas Mueller, stopping at the Source campaigner with 350.org. I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight, co-moderating this webinar on how to stop Kinder Morgan pipeline. We've got some spectacular speakers that are joining us this evening, including our own founder of 350, Bill McKibben. Is going to be speaking to us shortly. We've got representative, member of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, Indigenous rights leader across the Mother Earth, Rueben George is also going to be joining us. And we've got two dynamic youth leaders that are right now in Marrakesh, Morocco, attending the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP22, as part of the Canadian Youth Climate Change Coalition, CYCC delegation. That's Sadie Phoenix Lavoie, and of course, Brendan Campbell, forgive me. Sadie's a member of Saugeen First Nation here in Treaty 1 from the city of Winnipeg, and Brendan Campbell is a member of Noonjagawang community, member of, but we'll get back to that anyway. They'll be introduced by my co-moderator, Atia. So, why are we here today? Well, we wanted to share some information. There's just been such incredible momentum around resisting the fossil fuel regime across Turtle Island and across Mother Earth. We've all seen the, incredible battle that's taking place in North Dakota, in Standing Rock. And all of our hearts and prayers, have been uplifted by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that took action yesterday in solidarity with Standing Rock. Here in Canada, the fight has not stopped. We have half a dozen pipelines that are proposed, connected to the infamous tar sands in northern Alberta. And tonight, we're going to be talking about one of those projects, the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline. And that's what our speakers have come to talk about, how we're escalating to put pressure on the Trudeau government to reject this pipeline. This webinar is meant to add to the momentum that is building towards November 21st, where across Canada and Quebec, vigils will be taking place to stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline. So far up to date, we've seen just an incredible amount of action ramped up on the Kinder Morgan campaign, where in Ottawa recently nearly 100 students were arrested, protesting the Kinder Morgan pipeline right there at the House of Canada at Parliament. We've seen, high-profile sit-ins at 4 key cabinet ministers' offices, Minister McKenna, the Transport Minister, as well as the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, and of course, Minister of Natural Resources, Jim Carr, here in my own hometown of Winnipeg in Treaty 1 territory. And of course, we've heard the voices of First Nations involved in the Treaty Alliance against the tar sands, and many other First Nations in British Columbia in the proposed right-of-way of the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline, continue to reaffirm their steadfast opposition. Just today, internationally, we've seen the Canadian Youth Climate Change Coalition just this evening interrupt a Canadian government reception where they dropped a banner that said "Reject Kinder Morgan," while they delivered 210 water droplets that they had designed, each water droplet representing over the 210,000 signatures that have been amassed thus far of Canadians and First Nations and Quebecois that are opposed to the Kinder Mountain or the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And yesterday at Canada House in the iconic Trafalgar Square in London, England, we've seen our allied campaigners take action targeting that Canadian embassy, again with the same message that Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline is not in the national interest, and that Prime Minister Trudeau needs to reject this. So a bit of context. you know, you and me and all of our friends, all of our family, people power in general can and will stop this pipeline, either by forcing Prime Minister Trudeau to reject it or by building the community that can stop it, even if he approves it. Kinder Morgan is bigger than the Keystone Pipeline. Many of you remember that fight, and it looks like it might be coming around again with President-elect Trump. It has the same climate impact as adding 34 million cars to Canada's roads. You know, and if Prime Minister Trudeau and his cabinet approve this pipeline or any of the tar sands pipelines that they're considering, or tar sands expansion projects within Alberta that they're considering, there is absolutely no way that Canada can meet the Paris commitments that they made at last year's COP. And you know, building it will put us on track to burn up nearly a quarter of the world's carbon budget under a 1.5 degree scenario. There's a recent report that I wanted to highlight for all of you watching from Oil Change International, really amazing crew out of DC. This report, you know, dives deep into this carbon budget stuff, and you know, it definitely demonstrates the math behind the fact that we can't build Kinder Morgan, Trans Mountain, or any other new fossil fuel infrastructure if we're actually going to be able to you know, dramatically reduce the impacts of climate change that we're already locked into. Trump's election, you know, I know this has been weighing on the minds of everybody. Certainly, you know, it's been heavy on my heart. You know, that hurt, though, has been healed a little bit by the people power that I've seen, you know, of people hitting the streets and being out on the land taking action. And, you know, Trump's election means that Trudeau needs to step up and lead on the global stage, especially on climate. If Trudeau builds pipelines to the United States at this point, he could well be complicit in Trump's climate denial. This is an all hands on deck kind of moment, and a Kinder Morgan approval makes building other pipelines like the Keystone, the zombie pipeline that Trump's promising to bring back onto the table, and of course, you know, the pipeline that those of us here in Manitoba, where I live, and across Canada all the way to the Atlantic provinces, the territory of McMackey, the Energy East pipeline, more likely to be built. It will set the trend. And if Trudeau approves this pipeline, he'll certainly be looking towards facing similar circumstances as what has been happening in Standing Rock in terms of the scale of opposition, not just in British Columbia, but across Canada. And, you know, that's what November 21st is all about, the KM vigils. You know, these vigils are going to be designed to show just how widespread the opposition is to the expansion of the Alberta tar sands and its associated fossil fuel infrastructure. And so, you know, I want to transition, you know, from that context, you know, and introduce our first speaker. You know, he's a really dear friend, somebody that I look up to, you know, in the good work that he does. His name is Rueben George, and he is a manager of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation Sacred Trust Initiative. The Tsleil-Waututh Nation are the people of the inlet there in the Lower Mainland in the city of Vancouver, where Vancouver now sits. And his mandate is to protect the water from threats such as the proposed Kinder Morgan pipeline, and of course the associated oil tanker traffic that the project promises to bring if it's built. Rueben spent many years as the director of community development for his nation before taking on this critical work. He is guided by the traditional Coast Salish teachings and his spirituality as a Sundance chief. He is the grandson of Chief Dan George. He is a father. He has 2 children. He drives a pickup truck, and he loves sushi. So I want you to join me in welcoming my dear brother, Rueben George. He'll be our first speaker.
Hey guys, check out my halo. Somebody texted me, said, looks like you got a halo. It's good to see you guys. Hey Bill, I haven't seen you for a long time, brother. Good to see you all. Thank you for your kind words and the update. I went across Canada and the United States with the totem pole, and you guys hosted us in Winnipeg, and that was beautiful. And like you said, there's First Nations and non-First Nations all across North America that are coming together, and some people we saw with next to nothing in resources, and let alone to live, money to survive, but they're putting their heart and soul into stopping this destruction. I was instructed by my lawyer not to say certain things, so I won't say that the owners of these industries are murderers. They're killing people. I won't say that, and I won't say that the government of Canada are accomplices. I won't say that too, but the facts are there. I encourage people to look those up themselves. There's a lot of destruction that's happening, and like you said, half the world's animals have died since 1970, and we're going on a crash course. I travel all around the world, like a lot of you do on the panel, and when in the back countries of you would think progressive countries, and in the back roads and the little towns, half the groceries are on the shelves. I was down in Panama, and they shut down the city at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock, sort of 8 o'clock in the evening, to discourage people from using water, and that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. They're shutting it down because of the water shortages. I drove from Arizona to LA, and I drove through like 2 hours of smog, real thick smog. My uncle, he's with me, and he goes, "Is that fog?" And I said, "No, I think it's smog." And sure enough, we drove into it, and it was horrible. And then driving up from California to Vancouver, saw these huge craters that had lakes in it, and it still had boats in it, and these empty lakes. And that's the same as when you fly over. It's just a matter of time. And I get really sad in all the ugly facts that we know, and the people that are suffering, the people that will suffer. And what this is about is that 1%. No bones about it. The Canada and US, they make decisions to help them and to support them, and to continue this destruction so they can make more money. We all already know it doesn't create jobs. I was happy to read that Tesla's company made more money in the first quarter than the fossil fuel industry in the whole year. We have alternatives, and they're stopping it, they're blocking it, and they're doing what they have to do to continue this destruction. And we won't stand for it here in Tsleil-Waututh. We said from the very beginning, we'll do what it takes to stop them. We created a 1,200-page document based on our cultural and our spiritual laws. When I was director of community development and helping our people heal, we came from those spiritual principles. And whether we're in business, it's the same spiritual principles. Whether it's fighting Kinder Morgan, it's the same spiritual principles. Those are our laws. And we created a 1,200-page document based on our laws. Tsleil-Waututh means people of the water around Vancouver. And that's our first mother. If you take the lessons and teachings of water and say, she fed us, she took care of us, and that's true. Scientific fact, 80% of Tsleil-Waututh's diet came out of the water right there. So we had our legends and our stories, and we backed it by science all the way through, from the beginning of time of our first story of the first Tsleil-Waututh human being, which was our mother who came from the Tsleil-Waututh water, so the water around Vancouver. Take those lessons and those stories that come out of it, and it created our document. And the thing with that, that's how we're winning in court. That's how we go to court, and 90% of First Nations here in British Columbia are winning against resource extraction. 170 legal victories in the last little while. I'm confident that the Canadian Constitution will protect our Indigenous rights. And what blows my mind away about that, and traveling across our country, and you see this too, brother, that a lot of our people are suffering. Just poor. You're only 3% of Canada's population, but we're 40% of the jail population. I worked in the jail system for 10 years. Downtown East Side, I worked down there with our homeless relatives, and we're 40% of the homeless, 40% of school dropout. Ugly statistics. Oliver, when he was Minister of Environment, he said, "Why don't the First Nations take the money? They need it." And maybe we do. Maybe we do. That money that was offered to One Nation, $1.6 billion, that would help all my people in that area out of poverty. Big time, wouldn't it? Put food on the table and clothes on their back and roofs over their houses. But you know what they did? They voted 100% consensus no. Because they work by the same spiritual laws and the same spiritual principles as Tsleil-Waututh Nation does. And you can't put a price on something that you're a part of that is your mother. Their stories of creation are the same as ours, similar. You know, where they come from earth. We all come from earth. It's our first mother. And you can't put a price on that. And it blows me away that, you know, that $1.6 billion would help all those people out of poverty, but they're still saying no. And that's that spirit that I see across North America that's going to bring us to victory. That's going to bring us to victory. If they don't say no to all that money, and they're saying yes to a healthy mother, yes to the salmon, and yes for the Canadian people. Canada don't have the balls to stand up and do what's right and make decisions for their own future generations. Neither does Kinder Morgan. I go pray in the swell lodge with my mom, and she goes, I pray for that guy. At one point in his life, he's a human being, and he was like any other baby with life in its eyes. You know, you look in his eyes, nothing there. That greed spirit just totally took him over, and he bought the media, and he bought the government, creates policy, breaks policy, is accountable to nobody. Big messes that are left there for Exxon Valdez 25 years later. It's still a big mess. And that's what we're dealing with, and those are breaking our laws. Everything that we get out of the water, what we say in our environmental assessment is good. It's all good. Everything, food, sustenance, everything. Transportation, the waterways of around Vancouver were our highways. That's how we visited one another. Everything we get out of the water is good. It's the only thing going back in there, and you've been with us, and simple, you know, we did a prayer outside Kinder Morgan Terminal, and we prayed. We said, only thing going into the water is going to be good, you know. And you know, I like what happened in Standing Rock. I like it. I think people have the freedom to express how they feel. You know, we're gonna. What I see, you know, the Canadian government always had the intentions to approve this. Might try to sit down and do what they feel is consultation of the 40-minute presentation to the National Energy Board, which is BS, because you can't talk about a 1,200-page document in 40 minutes. That's crazy. But anyway, they're approaching this with the idea of already saying yes. Look at Kerr's comments that he made on the news. What do you think about Keystone now that we looks like Trump will approve Keystone? What do you think about Kinder Morgan? Oh, we don't care about that. That's what he said today. And you know, so it's crazy that this is going the way it is, and how much destruction and how obvious it is, and these people still are trying to push these decisions. But I feel the country's waking up, and our people are waking up, and our allies are waking up, and you know, we see the reaction to Trump and him getting elected. The protests are still going on today, and the people are really waking up. 75% of Iowa residents don't want the Dakota Access Pipeline. 71% of Burnaby residents don't want Kinder Morgan. They support the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and suing them. So when people find out the true facts of the destruction that this causes, they'll want to make the better choices for their future generations, because it's obvious and apparent these greedy people don't care. They care about their money. They're crazy. They're crazy to me. They're crazy people and those are the, I can't say murderers, but they are. It's true. Oh, I can't say that. Sorry, but I retract that. My lawyer said. But you know, I'm proud to know everybody on there. I watch the work that you're doing. I see 350, what you guys are doing. I see all of you, and I'm really proud of the work you're doing and the people that you're touching, and the masses that you're waking up, and that spirit of what I said of the people and the connection to the earth is too strong, and the people are searching for more, you know. And my son, bless his soul, you know, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, went to U in Ottawa. He's in Winnipeg. He's in Washington, D.C., Australia, New Zealand, Panama, Peru, all since July. And he's only a teenager still, and he's just traveling, and he loves it. And he goes, Dad, I'd die for this. I see my relations down in Panama dying. I'd do the same thing. And I was like, you know what, son? I want grandkids. I love that you're a warrior and do that. And my mom's like, let's just go shut it down. I'll go chain myself to the fence again. And so, it's a family effort. And my daughter too, as well. Going to DC, New York, and all the trips that she's doing. And I'm proud of them. And it's alive and awake. And I know it is with each and every one of your family too. And we're winning. We're going to win. That's what I said to Richard Kinder when I talked to him at his AGM, spoke to the shareholders. I said, I was here a year before and I told you guys that it's not a good investment. And now look what happened. 3 months after I presented here last year, your stock fell by 60%, your dividends were cut by 75%. It's a house of cards ready to fall. I said, you guys are investors, put in green energy. Look at that taking off. So we said that. And Richard Kinder goes, I try to talk to you and to Tsleil-Waututh Nation. I said, not our duty and responsibility to talk to you. You're only a company. We're just going to shut you down. Canadian Constitution protects our Indigenous rights. We're going to sue you. Shut you all down. And he threw his hands in the air and he goes, go talk to Canada. Go talk to you. Need to. I smiled and said, we got you and you know it. It's a good moment. Shook his hand. Of course, nothing there. He's just believed in his money. But I'm thankful. That's my rant. That's my rant. Halo didn't do me any justice here. Angry Indian.
Well, I appreciate those powerful words, Rueben, and it is an honor, not just for myself as an individual, but for our organization 350 to be supporting to Tsleil-Waututh and to be supporting your even your own family on the ground, and in every community that I work in, from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico, what I've learned is it just takes one family, and that's how the tar sands campaign started. It was one family in Fort Chipewyan that decided to do something, and everything grew out of that one family deciding to do something. And I want to give a big shout out to Rueben, his beautiful words about his son Cedar, who was one of the youth leaders that came to the action in Ottawa a couple weeks ago, where 99 Canadian youth got arrested protesting Kinder Morgan at Parliament in a peaceful act of civil disobedience. His son spoke just as powerful as his dad, and I want to shout out his son's mother, who's Deborah Parker, who's another dear friend of 350, who spoke at the big Standing Rock action yesterday in Washington, D.C. So, with a mom like that and a dad like you, Rueben, wow. So that's a good segue. Rueben, if you don't mind staying on just a bit longer, we're going to have some questions at the end if we have time. I'm going to switch us over. If you can hit mute on your microphone, Rueben, I'm going to switch over and introduce our next presenter. I have his bio here. I'm going to read a little bit from it, but then I want to say a couple words about Bill too from my own perspective. Bill McKibben is an author and environmentalist who in 2014 was awarded the Right Livelihood Prize, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel. His 1989 book, The End of Nature, is regarded as the first book for a general audience about climate change and has appeared in 24 languages. He's gone on to write a dozen more books. He's the founder of 350.org, the first planet-wide grassroots climate change movement, which has organized 20,000 rallies around the world in every country save North Korea, spearheaded the resistance to the Keystone Pipeline campaign in collaboration with Indigenous peoples on the front line, with ranchers on the front line, and launched the fastest growing fossil fuel divestment movement all across Mother Earth. Bill's got just so many accolades that I don't want to get into while I introduce him. What I really want to say, though, is that Bill is a dear friend, a dear mentor, someone that I look up to, that I have tremendous amount of respect for, and it's a true honor to serve on the team that he's been able to pull together, a team of just truly inspirational organizers and campaigners and I really appreciate Bill. He's a humble man, and but he's a scrapper. He's definitely a fighter, and he takes risks. And so please join me in welcoming Bill to the Stop KM webinar this evening.
Well, it's really good to be with everybody and to see so many old friends. Rueben, while you were talking, I went and got the drum you gave me years ago, which is one of my favorite possessions, and it's nearby at all times, and brings back many good memories. And in fact, Deborah and I were sitting next to each other on the cement outside the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters in DC yesterday, blocking the doors for a couple of hours. And I was just sitting there, blocking the doors, but she, of course, was texting and causing all kinds of trouble with all kinds of good people all over the place. Clay, what a pleasure to get to join you as always. There's no one that it's much more fun to work with, and no one who's done close to as much work as on so many continents and so many days and so many places. Everybody else, what fun, especially to get to see the very weary-looking people from Marrakesh. I've been to too many of those COPs, and I know how it feels by about the middle of week 2, when you think that the entire world is just, a sort of indoors place with people pushing more paper at all times in your direction. So thank you for being there and letting some of us stay home this time. Look, there's no point sugarcoating things. This is a rough few weeks for the world. The election of Donald Trump is one of those historic moments in the world in the worst possible way. And it's going to cause trouble in the United States, but it's going to cause trouble everywhere else that there possibly is. And so more than ever, we need to be sticking together and doing work where we can do it. And while Canada was suffering through Stephen Harper, we did our best down here to push our man, Mr. Obama, to do the right thing on stuff like Keystone. So we're very glad that the Canadians are pushing hard as hell on Mr. Trudeau now. We seem to go a little bit up and a little bit down on either side of the border here in terms of our leaders. And we'll do everything we can think of to help everybody up there, because you guys are going to be doing super important work over the next while, because somebody has to hold the world together. And this Kinder Morgan thing is just the place to start. I remember being out at one of the early public meetings, probably 6 or 7 years ago in Burnaby, with Maud Barlow, when people were beginning to voice their opposition, and just to watch it grow and grow and grow. The whole world saw those amazing pictures of the sit-ins day after day after day in the public park there in Burnaby, and they really made an impression on Canada, but on the whole world. This is the hottest year that we've ever had on the planet. It smashed the record we set in 2015, which smashed the record we set in 2014. Today, up above 80 degrees north, up towards the North Pole, it's 17 degrees Celsius above normal temperature. There's never been as little ice at this date as there is up there now. Same thing is going on in the Antarctic, where ice is melting very, very quickly. We're taken together. We're at the lowest global sea ice we've ever seen for this date. The world's starting to come apart, and starting to come apart in the most dire and sad and difficult ways. That's one of the reasons the election of Trump is so traumatic, because it couldn't come at a worse time. This is the moment when we need solidarity in every way, and not division, which is what he stands for. It's also a shame in its timing because the world was beginning to get some momentum towards renewable energy, towards solar and wind and the other forms of clean energy that give us a pathway out, a way to avoid fossil fuel. When the fight against Kinder Morgan or Keystone or any of these other pipelines started 8-10 years ago, a solar panel cost many times, 4 or 5 times what it costs today. That economics has shifted so dramatically that there's no excuse for building these things, but they just have the momentum of this industry behind them. This is these guys' last gasp, and they're willing to take it, even if it means breaking the planet along the way. We know this from reading the stuff we've learned from companies like Exxon over the last year, the great investigative reporting that shows they knew everything there was to know about this climate change stuff like 30, 35 years ago. And they've kept on anyway, doing what they do. That's hard to understand, hard for me to understand that there are people and institutions like that in the world, but it's easy to understand what we have to do, which is stand up to them. And that standing up sometimes seems very hard because they come with so much money. But money, while useful, doesn't buy you everything. It normally wins, but only when we don't stand up to it. When we do, we have a real chance. And that chance is greatly accelerated, greatly improved. The odds are greatly improved by the remarkable involvement and leadership of Indigenous communities now around the world. I think if there's one thing over the last 10 years, that maybe two things that have changed the debate around the environment is one is the work the engineers have done to drive down the cost of renewable energy. And the other is the emergence of Indigenous people on every continent in the forefront of this fight for a couple of reasons. One of them, of course, is the kind of just spiritual prophetic power that comes from long residence in place. The credibility and ability to speak for places and to do it with real power. The other is simply the fact that across the world, so many of the places where Native people got pushed to or drawn into small reserves and or everything else turn out to be critical nodes for the fossil fuel industry going forward. And there's a great irony there, and some karma that's coming back to bite these guys, and that's very good to see. I mean, Ruben's land mass there isn't very big in the scale of things. It just happens to be in precisely the wrong place if you're an oil company that wants to do what it wants to do. And so, one can definitely and should look at it as their obligation to protect the waters of Burrard Inlet there and that whole part of the world. And one can also look at it as they're perfectly positioned to help protect the atmosphere of the entire planet, the climate of the Earth. That's pretty dramatic, high stakes. I was thinking that so much when I was out at Standing Rock 10 days ago or so. I mean, right now, no question, Standing Rock's sort of the moral center of the universe. It's an amazing scene for people who haven't seen it. If you sort of look to one side so you don't see all the cars that are parked in the parking lot, you could be looking back 100, 150, 300, 500 years. I mean, the scene is remarkable. The teepees and the campfires there along the confluence of the Missouri and the Cannonball, the young boys racing horses much too quickly hither and yon. It's a tremendous scene and a place of great prayer, great spiritual power, and great power. ability to get in the way of the smooth operation of the destruction of the planet is, well, that's a privilege for all of us. That's our job, all of us, to get in the way of the smooth operation of the destruction of the earth. And so now you guys get, you know, a real chance to finish off this Kinder Morgan pipeline, just in the way that people managed to do in the Northern Gateway pipeline and are going to do in the Energy East pipeline when the time comes, and so on and so forth. But this Kinder Morgan one is, it just couldn't be more obvious. You can't, the scientists have made it utterly clear that we can't build more fossil fuel infrastructure, that the oil fields, gas fields, and coal mines that we now have in production, not the reserves, not what we're going to do someday, the stuff we're already drilling, mining, that's enough carbon in there to take us way past the 2-degree target that every country on Earth, including Canada, solemnly signed up for. Hell, Canada pushed us to go to 1.5 degrees, and thank them for doing it at Paris, but it doesn't mean anything if you keep building pipelines. You know, it's as two-faced as it's possible to be, what Canada's doing at the moment, if it goes ahead and improves these pipelines. So this Kinder Morgan fight is one of the most important things going on in the planet. And it's a winnable battle with people power. If people turn out, if they turn out for these vigils on the 21st, if they turn out to continue to make it clear to Trudeau that his legacy and his whole term in office will be shadowed by what they seem to be nerving themselves up to do, and approve this pipeline. And he needs to know that he's going to face, I'm pretty sure, I mean, you guys will know better than me, Clay and Rueben and others, and I don't mean to speak for you, but my guess is that we're looking at Standing Rock North. If he goes through with the plans for doing this, that there's going to be the same kind of people rallying and the same kind of numbers with the same kind of spirit. And that spirit is extraordinarily dangerous thing for a politician to conjure up and decide that they want to mess with, because it's so powerful, so historically resonant. And the fact that oldest wisdom on our continent that Rueben was talking about now meshes perfectly with the newest scientific wisdom that's coming out of our university research centers and labs and things. That makes this an extraordinarily potent moment. That's a difficult force to fight against. I'm so grateful to you all for marshaling that force, and we will do everything we can to help make sure that everybody the world around knows the name of this pipeline and knows exactly how important it is to shut it down. So thank you guys enormously for the work that you're doing. And as everybody in Canada should know, it's you know, the same kind of work that's going on all over the world, but everybody has their eyes on you guys up north. They know that this is a big, important fight, and they know that you guys are the guys to be fighting it. And it's so much fun to just get to be in support of you all going on.
Thank you so much, Bill, for that incredibly powerful call to action. And you're right, our greatest power does come from the ability to get in the way. And that's hopefully what we will continue to do. And thanks again, Rueben, for joining us. It's such an honor to hear from you as always. It is now my pleasure to introduce our two next panelists who are joining us from Morocco right now. It is really, really late in Morocco right now, but they are here nonetheless. Two youth delegates from the Canadian Youth Delegation to COP22. We have with us Brendan Campbell, who is a student, a member of the Ngajawang Nation, and a Treaty 6 Cree. We also have with us Sadie Phoenix Lavoie, who is also a student, a member of the Saking First Nation. And Sadie was one of the 99 young people who were arrested in Ottawa on October 24th, calling for a rejection of the Kinder Morgan pipeline. These are two incredibly inspiring folks. I have spent most of my evenings over the last week and a half just on social media following the work of the Canadian Youth Delegation, because they are holding the Canadian government accountable to their words on climate leadership and the promises that the Canadian government has made on Indigenous rights. They have been nonstop since they landed in Morocco, and just now they earlier this evening interrupted a Canadian government reception to drop a banner and deliver 210,000 signatures opposing the Kinder Morgan pipeline. It is such an honor to hear from these young people. Thank you to both of you for the amazing work that you are doing and for joining us tonight. So I'm going to pass it off to Sadie and Brendan.
Awesome. Okay, hello. Yeah, I'll just introduce myself. Bonjour, Amin, Tense, Bonjour, Indigenous class, Staging and Juji, we connect with them.
Bergamo Tigasan, Neko Nia, Munyawashi Gahiga Niku Kayate. So, my name's Ren Campbell. I am a person from Montreal Cree Nation, but I live currently in Gojuanong, which is Mississauga Anishinaabe territory, also known as Peterborough, Ontario.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, we're the two Indigenous youth with the Canadian Youth Delegation. Brendan and I actually know each other through the National Aboriginal Caucus, because we're also Indigenous student leaders within the student movement. Not even that, we just kind of came naturally around climate justice. And so I guess I'll just kind of talk a little bit about the protest that happened on Parliament Hill around when we were getting arrested. And to here, organize around getting a lot of students and young people all across Canada to kind of send a message that, you know, young people care about their future, and they don't want the government to, you know, pass or approve the Kinder Morgan pipeline. So we always seem to be like that. We were like, let's have a meeting all. And so it got to a point where we have to send a stronger message, and actually we have to do civil disobedience across and to get that attention. So the way I saw it was that by me getting arrested was like a small sacrifice in comparison to what was going on in Standing Rock. I mean, I went down to Standing Rock and I met people and then made relationships with them, and the abuses that they were facing, I was like, why would I ever be scared of getting arrested in Canada if that's the treatment they're facing in Standing Rock? I literally had, like, with fierceness, was just like, no, I'm going across this stupid fence that was on unceded Algonquin territory at a Democratic building that was so ironic, and this didn't make any sense to me, but they arrested me anyways, alongside a lot of amazing young people. And actually 2 other CYD members were also there. Gabrielle and Tina, they were also there that got arrested. Yeah, so that really amped us up for preparing for, you know, these talks that we will be having here in Marrakesh, to be like, you know, a bunch of young people had to get arrested just to get your attention, because just never enough for you. And it was so frustrating that we have to like do these direct actions in order to seriously that we're serious, that we care about our future, and as young people, like COP started before the election, and you see those like around like, okay, how can whether higher voters go south? What does that mean for the interests of corporate businesses in the fossil fuel industry, and what is their role within and mitigating and adapting for them? But then as soon as the Trump election happened, like everything shifted. The global South countries were freaking out, like, okay, now we have to shift our discussion, because they're already accepting the fact that we're not going to meet a 1.5 carbon budget. It's going to go above and beyond that, if not even 2 degrees, cap. So they're trying to prepare, like, okay, now we're going to have to like move like millions of people from these countries into safety, and there's going to be environmental refugees. Totally shifting the discussions around. So and everyone kept talking about like America, Trump, and it took us at a huge shock, because I think a lot of people underestimated the potential of him being elected, and so that huge ripples and reverberations within the negotiations that were happening here and Canada. And we were posing questions to the negotiators, like, how is this going to have an impact with you making a commitment or meeting your commitments when they want to have like this pan-North American agreement with the United States and Mexico? Does this mean that does this mean that you're going to amp up your climate finance to the fact that U.S. probably isn't going to meet their targets? Now you have a even larger global responsibility, with the U.S. not taking a firm stance on climate change. So they've been completely untransparent with these briefings. So that's really frustrating for us, and especially when we know the facts and we know the science, and it seems like they're not listening to it because there's something going on in the background. And really, we're just doing all we can with these actions to highlight a lot of their contradictions to what they say, to what their actual interests are, and how they subtly bring up about like, oh, we're so excited about business, we're so excited that these investors are here. We want businesses to like, the way that they say it in subtly terms is like, oh, we're excited about business going green, as in like they're allowing oil companies to invest somewhat into green technology to save their own company, to greenwash them and say that it's still okay for them to continue their involvement within the fossil fuel industry. Canada's still heavily subsidizing the oil industry by billions of dollars, and then carbon pricing them. It just makes no sense. And so ultimately, Canada needs to divest and needs to have a just transition by respecting Indigenous people's rights. And in Article 26 of UNDRIP says that Indigenous peoples should have the right to control land resources that were traditionally occupied, which would mean that Indigenous peoples have the right and say for any of these development projects anywhere in Canada, regardless of where their reservations are, where their territories are. So it's really highlighting the fact that the treaty lines against the tar sands expansion, highlighting the petition around the Kinder Morgan pipeline, Indigenous people's resistance against all pipelines, keep it in the ground, all these grassroots movements and mobilizations around anything fossil fuel related. And yet they're saying, oh, we're listening to Indigenous people, we're listening to the youth, but yet listening to us because we've said no multiple times, but they think that if they talk to us or consult us, that's as much as they need to do. They don't need to act upon what is being said, what is being demanded of them, being told. So we're really keeping on them that, you know, you don't get to just check off the consultation box when it comes to you. You don't get to check off the box when it comes to consulting with Indigenous people. You actually need consent, and you're showcasing with your actions here that no, they don't have consent. They do not have any. Whoopsie! Sorry. Friend from home's calling. So yeah, basically, we're telling them that we are watching them, that we are holding them to account, and that we're not satisfied with anything that they're doing. It's completely inadequate. They're making these targets, but without a plan of actually meeting them. And yeah, I don't know.
One thing I could really emphasize by meeting Ken, and I've never met her prior to coming to COP, is that, like, and I was thinking of writing an open letter, and I'm thinking of bringing it to CYD, but like, I am so disappointed in her, and maybe I shouldn't have set a bar around me, set a really low bar because it's the Canadian government, but she's not really that accountable. She talks about the importance of Indigenous peoples, and they always quote Justin Trudeau's, you know, quote from last year that no legend is more important to his government in Canada than that with Indigenous peoples. But like, she spends more time talking than actually listening. When we come to the stakeholder meetings, which are half an hour long, she spends like 10 to 15 minutes talking about how much she listens and how much good stuff has happened. I mean, we're all part of these meetings in some way or form. We know that you can just send us some, like, your report prior to the meeting, we can read it and then ask questions based on that. You know, like, she just takes up so much space and talks so much, and she's not accountable. She's not approachable. There was the event earlier today on like the contributions of Indigenous peoples in Canada to addressing our climate change, and there was an elder, I can't remember his last name, but his first name is Francois, and he's Dene, and he was talking about, I recorded the video and I'll send it later, but he's from the AFN, he's an elder from the AFN, he's an elder from Dene territory, and he was talking about sin, and it was like, the sin was like when you start to like when your relationship with Gigawino as your mother Earth isn't a good relationship, when you start to be like, you know, whatever, not well, and like, because we're doing a lot of pressuring for inner bargain. Sorry, yeah, Francois Paulette, I guess. Thank you, Clayton. Because like he was making the statement, and like it was a really pointed statement, and Kevin Hart was a bit more pointed when it came to like no pipelines, but like as soon as like just turned and stared right at her, like, as I was trying to like see if I can like maybe that's just a really like direct way of direct action, but like I don't know. All I can say from my experience with her is that like I'm just so disappointed in her. Like she talks about her Inuit friends and tokenizes the
so
people.
Hard.
It's gross. It's gross. It's disgusting. And I wasn't able to participate in the direct action today because I had my drum and I was gonna play a water song, but alcohol around, so I was like, I'll eat my drum on his face. But like when I was just seeing her in that space, like shaking hands, smiling, being all schmoozy, like it's disgusting. It's disgusting. So to communicate to anybody who's watching, I just want to impress upon you how terrible of a listener McKenna is, as much as she says that she like is a good listener. It's just, it's so fake, it's so empty. Yeah, youth circle.
The youth circle, she sent in her own youth delegates and didn't even tell the CYD, the Canadian Youth Delegation, about it. We found out through So we're all wearing our Pipeline Politics t-shirts. And she gets up there and it's like talking nonstop for like 10, 15 minutes about how she wants to listen to youth, how she met with Indigenous leaders, how she's so proud of the preamble, the Paris Agreement, yet it's not even sufficient within the body of the text. And like, it's going on. She's like, yeah, so I'm so excited to listen to the youth. How many Canadians are here? And like, we all like, we're like, yeah, it's us. And then so she stops talking, and then 2 seconds later, she like runs out of the door, like runs out of the room, like
busy. She's busy.
And then when we addressed her about it at the stakeholder meeting again, she was just like, "Oh, I leave all my meetings early," and it was just like, but that totally contradicts what you were saying. You did not listen to us. And like we were pushing for a meeting with her, and we were pushing anything for some type of acknowledgement that youth are here and they are dealing with how you're handling the situation, and to how you're tokenizing us and saying that you're meeting with us when you're not. Just really frustrating. So anyways, the about the petition was bang on. We had word that TransCanada and Enbridge were there in disguise as NGOs. And we just took up space and we just like was like, "Hey, McKenna, we're here to deliver a petition." And yeah, it was truly awesome.
And tomorrow we'll be meeting with her at 8 a.m.
8 a.m. tomorrow. So like
15 minutes a meeting.
15 minutes a meeting. So she's probably gonna talk for 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just an update from like stuff that's going on here.
Well, I want to thank you so much for just your incredible leadership, Brendan and Sadie, and really the whole CYCC delegation. The work you're doing there, putting that pressure on Minister McKenna, not letting the Canadian government continue to greenwash what it's doing back home. The Trudeau government has definitely got some pretty talented PR people, and having sharp leaders like you there to crack a whip on them and put them in line is something that is just so very inspiring. And the images that have been coming out of Marrakesh are awesome. I've been seeing so much traffic on social media and people that are moved by what's happening there at the COP22. I want to shift now. Just we're getting close to the end of our hour here together, to all the viewers. But I did want to at least have one or two questions. There's a text box right below for those of you that are logged in at kmvigils.ca. If you have a couple of questions, for our young leaders from Marrakesh, Brendan and Sadie, or for Rueben George of the Tsleil-Waututh, or Bill McKibben, now would be the time to send a couple of those out. And while we're waiting for those questions to pop up, I just want to continue to say, how important it is that native or not native, one of the biggest asks that have come from our relatives in Tsleil-Waututh, from up in the tar sands, from those in the Arctic region fighting offshore drilling, and certainly those down in the Gulf states, that are fighting oil development in the Gulf, right to Standing Rock, those fighting gas development in Macmackie in the east. One of the things that they've always, that has been kind of shared between what they've been asking for in terms of support has been for you to put your own intentions up into the world, pray in your own way. And if you're not a prayerful type of person, then, however you connect to the great mystery, whether it's just by taking a walk in a favorite place in nature, do that. But think about, Tsleil-Waututh, think about that water, think about the atmosphere that we're trying to protect from the expansion of big oil into these sacred places. And, put those prayers up in a good way, or at least that intention up in a good way. And, I'm going to go ahead and go and check out any of the questions we have. First question for Rueben is how can we directly support Tsleil-Waututh Nation?
There's some things coming up, like on Saturday there's a big rally that's coming. Can you hear me? Yep. There's a big rally coming up. There's going to be multiple events coming up. Just look at Tsleil-Waututh Nation Sacred Trust website. We'll give you constant updates. Anything that we're putting on, we encourage you to come and support. Tsleil-Waututh it needs a lot of support, and our court cases, those are inevitable. I think Standing Rock North is inevitable, and I think when those things come about, come and support as much as you can. I just want to add one more comment. It's not just that we're saying no, but we're also helping as much as we can. We've been cleaning our inlet for the first time in 30 years. We had a clam harvest, and it's because we're cleaning our inlet with some partners. Our salmon count 10 years ago was down to 6,000. Last year they counted 10 million. You know, the elk reintroduction put 37 elk in our territory. Now there's over 300. The elk brought in wolves and grizzly bears and flowers and birds. And so, you know, we're doing, you could reverse a lot of this horrible things that are happening. And I encourage that too. If there's something that we're doing around that, look at our website. We're always looking for more members, more people to help, and keep on them. Keep on them. You know, we always express that people, you know, we have to be careful about our court case, not to screw it up with me, myself, getting in trouble as an employee of Tsleil-Waututh Nation. But people have a freedom to express what they feel, you know, and along the pipeline, and we encourage that. And they like Standing Rock is such a great idea.
One more question, Rueben, and then I have a question for our young leaders. I'll ask them both at the same time. From Katie Creela of Rueben, when we met with Carolyn, Minister Bennett here in Toronto last week at the sit-in, she defended Kinder Morgan as something First Nations support. And yet when we pushed, it turned out she had never talked to anyone from Tsleil-Waututh. We got her to promise to talk to Tsleil-Waututh before the decision on KM is made. How can we hold her accountable to that? And before you answer, Rueben, for you, a question for you, Sadie and Brendan, is what will you say or ask McKenna in your meeting tomorrow? Rueben, you go ahead, and then Sadie and Brendan.
Well, multiple things came out of like you see in the National Energy Board. You know, no matter what aspect of government or whoever it is, whoever it might be, even if we sit down and talk to them, they have their agenda to say yes. You know, we have our agenda to say no. We walk away and say, are we going to sue them yet? You know, they walk away and said, are we going to approve it yet? The National Energy Board, you know, it's Stephen Kelly put in 20% of Kinder Morgan's application to the National Energy Board on behalf of Kinder Morgan. Then the National Energy Board hired him. And then they created this ministerial committee with former Chief of Tawasin, Kim Baird, who is conflict of interest, also who is also working with Kinder Morgan. So no matter what they do and how they talk and how they behave, they always have the best interests of the fossil fuel companies in mind to support them and find a way to say yes. I think what we're doing, you know, like suing them, what we're doing with our sit-ins, what we're doing with the rallies, what we're doing with the protests and the educating Canadian people, we have to continue on them. I believe we have them on the ropes. And we have to continue pushing really hard, you know, pushing really hard. There's already 13 pipelines coming out of the Alberta tar sands. Some of this feels like a smokescreen because we have to stop those ones too. You know, there's already this, there's so much destruction. Like Vancouver, we have coal, we have uranium, we have this very toxic, very dangerous chlorine plant. We have these concrete plants. There's a lot of work for us to do, and we have to, once we start getting victories and we're able to stop these fossil fuel companies, like if we did in court, what is after that? Let's start creating, and like with Tsleil-Waututh, we created our laws. We have our laws, and we have to make them abide by them. When we say nation-to-nation consultation, it's not a 40-minute presentation to National Energy Board, that ministerial committee trying to unscramble egg that National Energy Board created. You can't do that. And if we sit down and talk about our 1,200-page document, that's going in the right direction. But you know, what we're not changing is we're saying no. And I don't know who they're talking along the pipeline, because I talked to people in Washington State, Vancouver Island. I was just up in Kamloops, all along the pipeline. And there we got lots and lots of support of First Nations that are saying no. And anything that's happening in your area with those First Nations, try to look at their website, try to help them. You know, I'm really, really proud of our youth. So proud of our youth. It has to be youth driven, and I'm so proud of them. So I think that they're on here. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to read out. We got we got one question for our young leaders from Marrakesh, which is, what are you going to say to Catherine McKenna tomorrow? And then I want to end us off with a question for Bill. You know, one of the questions that we had, Bill, from Eric from Victoria asked, why vigils as a tactic? What makes a powerful night vigil? You know, I know that Bill will probably have a good response for that. So we'll go to our young people and then to Bill, and then we're going to go back to our 350 Canada digital campaigner, Atia, my co-MC, who's going to go over some logistics tied to our November 21st KM vigils. Go ahead, Sadie and Brendan. What are you going to say to McKenna tomorrow?
For sure. So the group's actually having a meeting downstairs discussing about what we're going to be talking about. Before we dropped it now, so then debrief with them for the pledge she's actually on to govern. And she's where the people that her governments, people that have said that they're going to respect Indigenous people's rights, they really say to the youth, and the fact that, you know, she's representing more people than rather than just corporate, and to what, like, whose ear is she really listening to, and which ear is she actually going to act upon, was kind of the message that I sent to the group to decide on what they're going to say. But specifically, they're talking about UNDRIP. Transition away from also subsidies against specific things. And I told them that.
Sorry, Sadie, we're getting real spotty audio from you. If you could talk in your mic a little closer.
To not ask why state makes up a state as a consensus. Probably that's something to corporate interest. People try. I was basically saying that speak up. That clear.
Sorry, our connection with Marrakesh, I think, is getting a little spotty.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, maybe type what your response is if you can in the sidebar. I'll read it out. Let's transition over to Bill here, and
first of all, what fun to hear from everything that's going on in Marrakesh, and it sounds like you guys are giving them holy hell, so that's good. I just, as to nighttime and vigil, I would just say that nighttime is often the right time for this kind of work, because there's something, you know, we live in a world where we spend half the day staring into screens and we're distracted and there's always something going on, and then it gets dark and there's some candlelight or a campfire or something like that, and we're back where human beings spent much of their lives, you know, in the dark looking at some light, not at the little glowing thing in your palm, but at some real light. And there's some great centering power there. And, you know, look, there's many aspects to all these fights. There's legal and political and economic and tactical and so on and so forth. But don't underestimate the part of this that comes down to just sheer spirit. Getting people to the point where they're feeling the courage to do the things that have to be done. So we'll be watching with envy all the amazing images that I know will be coming back from Canada on the night of the 21st.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you to all of our viewers and all of our panelists today. It was such an honor to be on the same webinar as all of you. Bill didn't in fact choose the vigil tactic that we're going for. So just wanted to also add that we were very much inspired by the vigils against Keystone XL that took place in 2014. And that was one of the reasons why the Canada team chose vigils as a tactic to stop Kinder Morgan on November 21st. I just wanted to say that I first joined the climate justice movement on the West Coast by joining the fight against the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And back then, I did not ever expect that Kinder Morgan would be making national headlines in the way that it is today. And that is very much thanks to the work that the folks on this webinar are doing, the work that Rueben is doing, and Sadie and Brendan and Clay, as well as so many people across the country. And now with the decision on Kinder Morgan coming anytime before the end of 2016, we really want to make sure that we are taking this moment to stand up across the country and show the breadth and scale of the movement against Kinder Morgan. So that is why we're calling upon all of you and all of your communities across the country to take action on November 21st. This is our moment to send one last message to the Trudeau government before they announce their decision. You can visit kmvigils.ca to see if there is a vigil near you. There are over 32 vigils that have already been planned across the country, so you can sign up to join one by visiting kmvigils.ca and find out where it is in a community near you. You can also sign up to host one if your community is not on our map currently. And if you sign up to host one, we will get back to you with a toolkit and all the resources that you need in order to plan a vigil. We will also have a call on Friday for new organizers to get them ready and prepped for the day of vigils. And I'm really looking forward to standing with all of you across the country on November 21st to send Prime Minister Trudeau a very clear message. Climate leaders don't build pipelines. We need to reject Kinder Morgan. Thank you so much. And so honored that over 130 people were able to join us tonight to watch live. So honored that Rueben George, Clayton Thomas Mueller, Bill McKibben, Sadie Lavoie-Phoenix, and Brendan Campbell were on this webinar, and really looking forward to continue fighting. Let's stop some pipelines.